The rain fell hard on the small town of Millbrook that autumn evening in 2019. In a tiny apartment on the third floor of an old building, a 7-year-old girl named Maya sat near the window. She could not see the rain, but she could hear every drop. She could feel the cold air coming through the cracks in the window frame. Maya had been blind since birth. Her eyes were open, but they saw nothing except darkness. Her world existed through sounds, smells, and the gentle touch of her fingers. Maya lived with her grandmother, Rosa, who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Rosa cleaned offices in the morning and washed dishes at a restaurant at night. She was 63 years old, and her body ached every single day. But she never complained. She had promised Maya's mother, her own daughter, that she would take care of this child. Maya's mother had died when Maya was only 2 years old. A car accident had taken her life on a snowy December night. Maya's father had left before she was born. He never came back, not even for the funeral. The apartment was small. It had 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom with a leaking tap. The walls were thin, and Maya could hear everything that happened in the building. She heard the couple fighting on the floor below. She heard the old man coughing through the night in the apartment next door. She heard children running and laughing in the hallway after school. But there was one sound that Maya loved more than anything else. It came from the apartment above them, where a music teacher named Mrs. Chun lived. Mrs. Chun gave piano lessons to children from wealthy families. Every afternoon, Maya would sit on her bed and listen. The sounds floated down through the ceiling like magic. Sometimes the music was slow and sad. Sometimes it was fast and exciting. Maya did not know the names of the songs, but she knew each one by heart. She would close her eyes, though it made no difference to her darkness, and let the music fill her mind. In those moments, she could see colors, not with her eyes, but with her heart. The high notes were bright yellow, like sunshine. The low notes were deep blue, like the ocean she had never seen, but had heard about in stories. One day, Maya asked her grandmother a question that would change everything. She asked if she could learn to play the piano. Rosa stopped what she was doing. She was folding the one good dress she owned, getting ready for work. She looked at her granddaughter sitting on the bed with her small hands folded in her lap. Maya's eyes stared at nothing, but there was hope on her face. Rosa felt her heart break into 1,000 pieces. She knelt down in front of Maya and took her small hands. She explained that piano lessons cost money. She told Maya that they barely had enough for food and rent. She said that buying a piano was impossible. It would cost more than Rosa earned in several months. Maya nodded slowly. She did not cry. She never cried about things she could not have. She had learned very young that crying did not change anything. But that night, when Rosa left for her evening job, Maya climbed onto a chair and pressed her ear against the ceiling. She listened to Mrs. Chun playing alone, practicing for hours. And in her heart, Maya made a promise to herself. Someday she would touch those keys. Someday she would make that beautiful sound. Weeks passed, and then months. Maya turned 8 years old. There was no birthday party, just a small cupcake that Rosa brought home from the restaurant. They sang happy birthday together in their tiny kitchen. Rosa gave Maya a gift wrapped in newspaper. It was a small music box that played a simple tune when you opened it. Rosa had found it at a second-hand store for $3. It was old and scratched, but it still worked. Maya held it like it was the most precious treasure in the world. She opened and closed it hundreds of times that night, memorizing every note. Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Chun's health began to fail. She was 75 years old, and her fingers were not as strong as they used to be. She could not teach as many lessons anymore. The wealthy families stopped coming. The building manager told Rosa that Mrs. Chun was thinking about moving to a nursing home. But before she left, Mrs. Chun did something remarkable. She knocked on Rosa's door one Sunday morning. Maya heard the knock and felt her grandmother move across the room. She heard the door open and the soft voice of the old woman from upstairs. Mrs. Chun asked if she could come in. Rosa said yes, though she was confused. Mrs. Chun had never visited them before. The old woman walked slowly into the apartment. Maya could hear her breathing was heavy and difficult. Mrs. Chun sat down on the only chair in the room and asked Rosa to sit with her. Then she turned toward Maya. Even though Maya could not see her dot, Mrs. Chun said she had watched them for years. She had seen Rosa working herself to exhaustion. She had noticed the little blind girl who always seemed to be listening whenever there was music. She asked Maya a question. She asked if Maya liked music. Maya's heart began to beat fast. She nodded her head eagerly. Then Mrs. Chun said something that made both Maya and Rosa gasp. She said she was giving away her piano. She was too old to play anymore, and she was moving somewhere she could not take it. She wanted Maya to have it. Rosa immediately protested. She said they could not accept such a valuable gift. She said it was too much. But Mrs. Chun raised her wrinkled hand to stop her. She explained that the piano was old, like her. It had been her companion for 50 years. She did not want it sold to a stranger or thrown away. She wanted it to go to someone who would love it. She said she had heard Maya singing softly through the floor sometimes, humming along to the music from above. She knew Maya had music in her soul. The piano was moved into their apartment the following week. It barely fit. They had to remove the small table where they ate dinner just to make room for it. The piano was large and dark brown, with keys that had turned slightly yellow with age. Some of the keys stuck when you pressed them. But to Maya, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. She stood in front of it for a long time, afraid to touch it, afraid it might disappear like a dream. Then, slowly, she reached out her small fingers and pressed one key. The sound that came out made her smile so wide that Rosa started crying. It was not a sad cry. It was a cry of joy and hope, and something neither of them had felt in a very long time. Mrs. Chun came down every day for the next 3 months to teach Maya. She moved slowly because of her bad hip, holding on to the railing as she descended the stairs. But she never missed a single lesson. She taught Maya how to position her fingers on the keys. She taught her about the different sounds each key made, about rhythm, about feeling the music instead of just hearing it. For a blind child, learning piano was different. Maya could not read sheet music. She could not watch Mrs. Chun's hands and copy them. Everything had to be done by touch and sound alone. But Maya learned fast. Faster than any student Mrs. Chun had ever taught. The old woman was amazed. She would play a passage once, and Maya would repeat it almost perfectly. It was as if the music entered through Maya's ears and flowed directly into her fingers without stopping in her brain first. Mrs. Chun said Maya had a gift. She said it was rare and precious. She said Maya must never waste it. By the time Mrs. Chun left for the nursing home, Maya could play 12 different songs from memory. She practiced every single day, sometimes for 5 or 6 hours. Rosa worried that she was overdoing it. She worried that Maya was not playing with other children or going outside. But the truth was, there were no other children who wanted to play with Maya. The neighborhood kids were cruel. They called her names. They said she was creepy because her eyes did not look at them properly. They threw things at her and ran away laughing. Maya had learned to stay inside where it was safe. The piano became Maya's best friend, her teacher, and her voice. When she was sad, she played slow songs that made her grandmother cry. When she was happy, she played fast songs that made her fingers dance across the keys like they had a life of their own. She learned new songs by listening to the radio. She would hear a piece of music once or twice, and then she would figure out how to play it on her piano. She made mistakes at first, hitting wrong notes, losing the rhythm. But she kept trying until she got it right. A year passed. Maya was now 9 years old. One afternoon, a man came to their building to fix the broken elevator. His name was David, and he was 42 years old. He worked as a maintenance worker, but he had once played in a jazz band when he was younger. As he worked on the elevator, he heard music coming from the 3rd floor. It was beautiful and complex, the kind of playing he had not heard in years. He assumed it must be a recording, or perhaps a professional musician living in the building. When he finished his work, curiosity got the better of him. He walked up to the 3rd floor and knocked on the door where the music was coming from. Rosa opened it, looking tired as always. David apologized for disturbing her and asked who was playing the piano. He said it was incredible. Rosa smiled a small, proud smile and opened the door wider so he could see. David's mouth fell open. There was a small blind girl sitting at an old piano, her fingers moving across the keys with complete confidence. She was playing a piece by Chopin, one of the most difficult composers in classical music, and she was playing it perfectly. David stepped inside and waited until Maya finished. When the last note faded away, he clapped loudly. Maya jumped in surprise. She had not known anyone was listening except her grandmother. David introduced himself and asked how long she had been playing. Rosa explained that it had only been a year and a half. David could not believe it. He said he had been playing for 30 years and could not play that well. He asked if Maya had a teacher. Rosa said no, not anymore. Mrs. Chun had passed away 3 months ago, in the nursing home. David made a decision right there in that tiny apartment. He said he had a friend who ran a music school on the other side of the city. It was a special school for gifted children. They gave scholarships to students who showed exceptional talent but could not afford the fees. He asked Rosa if she would let him arrange an audition for Maya. Rosa hesitated. She was afraid of getting Maya's hopes up. She was afraid of the outside world and how it treated her granddaughter. But Maya spoke up. She said she wanted to try. She said she was not afraid. The audition was scheduled for the following month. Rosa took a day off work, which meant losing money it could not afford to lose. She dressed Maya in her best clothes, a simple blue dress that Mrs. Chon had given her before she died. They took 3 buses to reach the music school. It was in a wealthy neighborhood where the houses were large and the cars were expensive. Maya could not see any of this, but she could hear the difference. The streets were quieter. The birds sang louder because there was less traffic noise. The music school was impressive. It had marble floors and high ceilings, and the smell of expensive wood and fresh flowers. Rosa felt out of place in her worn coat and old shoes. But she held her head high and held Maya's hand tightly. They were led to a large room with a grand piano in the center. It was much bigger and finer than the old piano at home. Maya could tell immediately by the sound of her footsteps, echoing that the room was huge. 3 people sat at a table, waiting to judge the audition. One of them was the director of the school, a woman named Dr. Patricia Wells. She was 60 years old, well-dressed, and known throughout the music world for discovering young talent. She looked at Maya with interest as the small blind girl was led to the piano. Rosa was asked to wait outside. She kissed Maya on the forehead and whispered that she believed in her. Then she walked out, closing the door behind her. Maya sat down at the grand piano. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, getting a feel for the instrument. It was different from her old piano at home. The keys were smoother. The sound was richer and fuller. She took a deep breath and began to play. She chose a piece that she had learned by listening to the radio. It was complicated and emotional, filled with highs and lows, with moments of desperate sadness and unexpected joy. As she played, the 3 judges stopped writing on their notepads. They simply watched and listened. Dr. Wells leaned forward in her chair, her eyes never leaving Maya's small fingers as they moved with impossible grace across the keys. When Maya finished, there was complete silence. Then Dr. Wells stood up. She walked slowly toward the piano and asked Maya how long she had been blind. Maya said she had been blind her whole life. Dr. Wells asked who her teacher was. Maya said an old lady named Mrs. Chun had taught her for 3 months, and after that, she taught herself. Dr. Wells was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that made Maya's heart soar. She said she had been running the school for 25 years. She said she had heard hundreds of auditions, and she had never, not once, heard a child play like Maya just played. She said Maya was accepted into the school with a full scholarship starting immediately. The music school changed Maya's life in ways she could never have imagined. She was now 10 years old and taking classes with children from wealthy families. These were children who had private tutors and expensive instruments and parents who drove luxury cars. Maya arrived each day on 3 buses, carrying a second-hand bag that Rosa had bought from a thrift store. Her clothes were clean but simple. She could not see the looks that some of the other students gave her, but she could hear their whispers. They called her the charity case. They said she did not belong there. They made fun of her clouded eyes and the way she walked with her hand stretched out in front of her. But Maya did not let their cruelty stop her. She focused on her music. She practiced longer and harder than anyone else. While other students went home after 3 hours, Maya stayed for 5 or 6. The school allowed her to use the practice rooms for free because they recognized her extraordinary talent. The teachers were amazed at how quickly she progressed. In 6 months, she was playing pieces that most students could not master in 3 years. Dr. Wells became Maya's mentor. She took personal interest in the young blind girl who had appeared out of nowhere and stunned everyone with her ability. She arranged for Maya to have special lessons with the best teachers at the school. She made sure Maya had access to audio recordings of all the great composers so she could continue learning by ear. She invited Maya to her home on weekends, where she had a beautiful grand piano that Maya loved to play. During one of these weekend visits, Dr. Wells told Maya about the Young Musicians International Competition. It was one of the most prestigious competitions for young pianists in the world. It was held every 2 years in Vienna, Austria. The greatest young talents from dozens of countries competed for the top prize. Winning the competition could launch a career. It could mean recording contracts, concert tours, and worldwide fame. Dr. Wells said she believed Maya was ready to compete. She said Maya was only 11 years old, one of the youngest competitors in the history of the competition. But talent had no age limit. Maya was terrified and excited at the same time. She went home that night and told her grandmother everything. Rosa listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. When Maya finished talking, Rosa did not respond right away. She was thinking about all the obstacles they would face. The competition was in Vienna. That meant plane tickets. That meant hotels. That meant money they did not have. And what if Maya lost? What if the experience broke her spirit? What if the world was too cruel to her? But Rosa also remembered the promise she had made to her daughter many years ago. She had promised to give Maya every chance at a good life. She looked at her granddaughter, whose face was glowing with hope and determination. And Rosa made a decision. She said yes. She said they would find a way. Finding a way turned out to be harder than either of them expected. The school was willing to pay for Maya's entry fee and provide a teacher to accompany her. But flights to Vienna and a hotel for a week were beyond what they could afford. Rosa started working a third job, cleaning a gym early in the morning before her other job started. She slept only 4 hours a night. Her body ached constantly, but she never complained. Then something wonderful happened. David, the maintenance worker who had first discovered Maya, heard about her situation. He told his friends at the jazz club where he used to play. One of those friends worked at a local newspaper. The friend wrote a story about Maya, the blind girl from the poor neighborhood who had taught herself to play piano and was now competing against the best young musicians in the world. The story went viral online. People from all over the country started sending donations. A local business donated plane tickets. A hotel in Vienna offered a free room. A television station wanted to film a documentary about Maya's journey. Suddenly, Maya's story was everywhere. She was invited to perform on a morning talk show. She played a piece by Beethoven, one of the greatest composers in history, who had also been deaf toward the end of his life. The host cried on live television. Viewers called in, saying they had never heard anything so beautiful. The donations continued to pour in. There was now enough money, not just for the trip to Vienna, but to buy Maya a new dress for the competition and to have her old piano at home repaired and tuned properly. Maya was overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers. She had spent most of her life being mocked and rejected. Now people were sending her letters of encouragement from all over the country. Children who were also disabled wrote to say she inspired them. Parents wrote to say she had given their families hope. Maya read these letters, or rather her grandmother read them to her, and she cried. She had never known that her music could mean so much to other people, but not everyone was happy about Maya's sudden fame. Some people were jealous. One of those people was a boy named Richard Chong. He was 14 years old and came from one of the wealthiest families in the city. His father was a famous surgeon, and his mother was a former concert pianist who had given up her career to raise him. Richard had been training since he was 3 years old. He had the best teachers, the most expensive instruments, and parents who expected him to win every competition he entered. Richard hated Maya. He hated that a blind girl from a poor family was getting more attention than him. He hated that the teachers praised her constantly. He hated that Dr. Wells seemed to favor her. Most of all, he hated that Maya was a better pianist than him. He could not admit this to anyone, not even himself, but deep down he knew it was true. When Maya played, something magical happened. The music seemed to come alive. When Richard played, it was technically perfect, but somehow cold, empty, like a photograph, instead of a living person. The week before they were scheduled to leave for Vienna, Richard approached Maya at the school. Maya was practicing in one of the small rooms, as she did every afternoon. Richard walked in without knocking. Maya heard footsteps and stopped playing. She asked who was there. Richard said his name and sat down on a bench near the door. He told Maya that she was making a fool of herself. He said she had no chance of winning the competition. He said the judges were serious professionals who would not be impressed by a sob story about a blind girl. He said she should stay home and save herself the embarrassment. Maya listened without interrupting. When Richard finished his cruel speech, she was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke calmly. She said she was not competing to win a trophy. She said she was competing because music was her life. She said she played because playing made her feel alive. She said she did not expect to win against people who had been training their whole lives with the best resources. But she said she would play her best and let the music speak for itself. Then she turned back to the piano and began to play again, ignoring Richard completely. Richard stood there, embarrassed and angry. He had expected her to cry or get upset or run away. He had not expected her to dismiss him so calmly. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Maya did not react. She kept playing, her fingers finding the keys as naturally as breathing. But inside, her heart was racing. She was more nervous than she had ever been. Richard's words had planted seeds of doubt in her mind. What if he was right? What if she was making a fool of herself? Vienna was everything Maya had imagined, and more. She could not see the beautiful old buildings, or the famous concert halls, or the streets where Mozart and Beethoven had once walked. But she could hear the city's music. There was music everywhere. Street performers played violins on corners. Church bells rang every hour. Even the language sounded musical to her ears, with its rising and falling tones. Rosa held her hand as they walked through the city, describing everything in detail. The architecture, the flowers in the parks, the elegant people drinking coffee in outdoor cafes. The competition was held in the Music Verein, one of the most famous concert halls in the world. Musicians considered it an honor just to perform there. The acoustics were legendary. Maya was told that the hall had golden columns and red velvet seats and chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds. She could not see any of this, but she could feel the history and importance of the place the moment she walked inside. The sound of her footsteps echoed in a way that told her the ceilings were impossibly high. There were 32 competitors from 18 countries. They ranged in age from 11 to 17. Maya was among the youngest. Most had been training since they were old enough to walk. Their parents had spent fortunes on lessons and instruments and coaches. They looked at Maya with curiosity, and in some cases, pity. The blind girl, the charity case, the one who had gotten famous because of her sad story, not because of her talent. At least, that was what they whispered to each other. The competition lasted 3 days. Each competitor had to perform 3 pieces. One classical piece from before 1800, one romantic piece from the 1800s, and one modern piece from the 1900s, or later. Maya had chosen her pieces carefully with Dr. Wells's help. For her classical piece, she would play Bach. For her romantic piece, she would play Chopin. And for her modern piece, She would play a composition by a Japanese composer named Toru Takemitsu, whose music was known for its dreamlike quality and unusual harmonies. The first day was nerve-wracking. Maya was scheduled to perform in the afternoon, so she had to wait and listen to other competitors play. Rosa sat next to her in the audience, holding her hand. One by one, the young pianists took the stage. Some were nervous and made mistakes. Others played flawlessly, but without emotion. A few were truly exceptional, their music filling the great hall and making the audience gasp with admiration. Then it was Maya's turn. Rosa led her to the edge of the stage and whispered words of encouragement. Maya walked out alone, her hand trailing along the edge of the piano until she found the bench. She sat down. The hall fell completely silent. 2,000 people watched as the small blind girl positioned her fingers on the keys. Many were skeptical. They had heard the media stories and assumed they were exaggerated. How could a self-taught blind girl from a poor family compete with the best young pianists in the world? Maya began to play her batch piece. Within seconds, the skepticism disappeared. The notes flowed from her fingers with a clarity and precision that stunned the audience. But it was not just technical skill. There was something else, something deeper. It was as if Bach himself was speaking through her, telling a story that was centuries old, but still alive and breathing. When she finished, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the hall erupted in applause. People stood up from their seats. Some were crying. Maya performed her second and third pieces over the next 2 days. Each time, the audience's reaction was the same. Stunned silence followed by thunderous applause. The judges scribbled notes furiously, exchanging meaningful looks with each other. Dr. Wells, who had flown in to watch, could barely contain her excitement. She knew they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that happened perhaps once in a generation. But the competition was not just about talent. There were politics and preferences and personal connections that influenced the judges' decisions. And there was one person who was determined to stop Maya from winning. That person was Marco Fontini, a world-famous Italian pianist who was serving as the head judge. Marco Fontini was 68 years old and had been performing since he was a teenager. He had won countless awards and was considered one of the greatest pianists of his generation. He was also arrogant, difficult, and known for his harsh criticism of other musicians. He believed that true art came from discipline and suffering, not from natural talent alone. He looked down on competitors who had not followed the traditional path. And he especially looked down on Maya. During a private judges' meeting after the second day, Marco made his feelings clear. He said Maya was a spectacle, not a serious musician. He said the media attention had biased the other judges. He said they were letting sympathy for a blind girl cloud their judgment. The other judges pushed back. They pointed to Maya's flawless technique, her emotional depth, her extraordinary ability to interpret complex pieces. But Marco held firm. He said he would not support giving the top prize to someone who had only been playing for a few years, regardless of how impressive she seemed. The final day of the competition arrived. All 32 competitors had performed. Now it was time for the judges to deliberate and announce the winners. Maya sat backstage with Rosa, her heart pounding. She could hear the murmur of the audience through the walls. She could feel the tension in the air. Rosa held her hand and told her that no matter what happened, she was already a winner. She had come further than anyone thought possible. She had shown the world what she could do. The judges' deliberation took 2 hours. Behind closed doors, arguments flew back and forth. Marco Fontini remained stubborn, refusing to give Maya any prize higher than third place. The other judges were frustrated. They felt he was being unfair. But Marco was the head judge, and his opinion carried extra weight. Finally, a compromise was reached. Maya would receive second place. First place would go to Richard Chung, who had also performed brilliantly and came from the kind of traditional background that Marco respected. The announcement was made to the audience. Richard's name was called for first place. He walked onto the stage with a triumphant smile, accepting the trophy and the applause. Then Maya's name was called for second place. Rosa led her onto the stage. Maya accepted her trophy gracefully, a smile on her face. But inside, she felt the sting of disappointment. Not because she wanted to win for herself, but because she knew the decision was not fair. What happened next was completely unexpected. It started with one person clapping in the audience. Then another. Then another. Soon, the entire hall was on its feet, giving Maya a standing ovation that went on for several minutes. People were cheering and crying. They were chanting her name. The message was clear. The audience knew who the real winner was. Marco Fontini sat at the judges' table, his face red with anger. He had underestimated the power of genuine emotion. He had underestimated Maya, and he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. The video of Maya's performance and the audience's reaction went viral within hours. News outlets around the world picked up the story. The blind 12-year-old who had received a standing ovation in Vienna. The girl who had moved thousands of people to tears with her music. The controversy over the judging began immediately. People on social media were furious with Marco Fontini. They called him arrogant and prejudiced. They demanded that the decision be overturned. A petition was started to strip him of his position as a judge for future competitions. Marco refused to apologize. In interviews, he insisted that his decision had been based purely on musical criteria. He said Maya was talented but inexperienced. He said Richard Chong was the more complete pianist. He said people were letting emotion cloud their judgment. But his words only made things worse. The public saw him as a villain who had tried to crush a deserving young girl. Maya and Rosa returned home to Millbrook. When they landed at the airport, a crowd was waiting for them. Reporters, photographers, and dozens of ordinary people who wanted to welcome Maya home. She was led through the crowd, with Rosa holding tightly to her hand. Microphones were thrust toward her face. Cameras flashed, though they meant nothing to her blind eyes. Everyone wanted to know how she felt about the controversy. Everyone wanted to know what she would do next. Maya said very little. She thanked everyone for their support. She said she was proud of her second-place finish. She said she hoped to continue playing and improving. She did not attack Marco Fontini or complain about the judging. Her grace under pressure only made people admire her more, but behind closed doors, Maya was struggling. The sudden fame was overwhelming. She was used to a quiet life with her grandmother in their tiny apartment. Now there were interview requests every day. Record labels wanted to sign her. Concert promoters wanted to book her for shows. Everyone wanted a piece of the blind piano prodigy. Maya did not know how to handle it. She was still just a 12-year-old girl who loved to play music. Dr. Wells flew in to help manage the chaos. She advised Rosa to hire a manager who could filter the requests and protect Maya from being exploited. She warned them that the music industry could be ruthless. People would try to use Maya's story to make money. They would not care about her well-being or her development as a musician. Rosa listened carefully and took her advice. They hired a manager named Sarah, a woman who had worked with young musicians before and had a reputation for being honest and protective. Over the next year, Maya's life changed dramatically. She gave concerts in small venues at first, then larger ones. Each performance was sold out. People came from hundreds of miles away to see the blind girl play. They cried. They gave her standing ovations. They waited in line for hours to meet her after shows. Maya was kind and patient with everyone, signing autographs and taking photos. Even though she could not see the faces of the people she was meeting, the money started coming in. For the first time in their lives, Maya and Rosa were not poor. They moved out of their cramped apartment into a proper house with a garden. Rosa finally quit her exhausting jobs and focused on taking care of Maya. They bought a beautiful grand piano for the living room. Maya played it every day, her fingers dancing across the smooth keys. Sometimes she played for hours, lost in worlds of sound that only she could see. But fame came with problems. Some people were jealous. They said Maya's success was only because of sympathy, not talent. They said she was being used as a marketing gimmick. Others were just mean. They sent hateful messages online, mocking her blindness and predicting that her career would fail. Rosa tried to protect Maya from these voices, but sometimes the cruelty got through. Maya would sit alone in her room after reading particularly nasty comments, wondering why people wanted to hurt her. The biggest problem came from an unexpected source. Richard Chang, the boy who had beaten Maya in Vienna, was furious about the attention she was receiving. He had won first place, but no one seemed to care. All the media coverage was about Maya. All the concert invitations were from Maya. Richard felt cheated. He had worked his entire life for this moment, and a blind girl had stolen his spotlight. Richard's mother made things worse. She was a bitter woman who had failed to achieve her own dreams of being a famous pianist. She had pushed Richard relentlessly since childhood, demanding perfection in everything he did. When she saw Maya getting all the attention, she became obsessed with destroying her. She started a campaign of whispers and rumors. She told anyone who would listen that Maya's talent was exaggerated. She claimed that Maya's recordings were edited to hide mistakes. She even suggested that Maya was not really blind, that it was all an act for sympathy. These rumors spread through the classical music world. Some people believed them. Others dismissed them as jealousy. But the damage was done. Whenever Maya performed, there were now skeptics in the audience, watching for any sign of fakery. Critics who might have praised her began writing harsh reviews. The beautiful bubble of support that had surrounded her started to crack. Maya tried to ignore the negativity. She focused on her music, practicing for hours every day. She was now 13 years old and had been playing for 6 years. Her skills had grown beyond what anyone thought possible. She could play the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire with apparent ease. She was developing her own unique style, a way of playing that was instantly recognizable. When Maya played, the music breathed. It lived. It told stories that words could never capture, but the constant pressure was taking its toll. Maya started having trouble sleeping. She would lie awake at night, replaying critical comments in her head. She began to doubt herself. Was she really talented, or was her success just because people felt sorry for her? Did she deserve all this attention? Would people still care about her when the novelty wore off? These thoughts spiraled in her mind, growing darker and more persistent. Rosa noticed the change in her granddaughter. She saw Maya becoming quieter, more withdrawn. She saw her eating less and practicing more obsessively. She tried to talk to Maya about it, but Maya always said she was fine. Rosa was worried. She remembered what the doctors had said about blind children being more vulnerable to depression and anxiety. She remembered how Maya's mother had struggled with mental health before her death. She prayed that history would not repeat itself. The breaking point came at a concert in New York City. It was the biggest venue Maya had ever played, a famous hall that seated over 2,000 people. Every seat was filled. Cameras were set up to broadcast the performance live on the internet. Millions of people around the world would be watching. The pressure was enormous. Maya was now 14 years old. She sat backstage, her hands trembling. She had never been this nervous before. The cruel comments and rumors had gotten inside her head. She kept thinking about all the people who expected her to fail, all the people who were waiting for her to make a mistake so they could say they were right about her all along. Rosa sat next to her, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement. But for the first time, the words did not help. The time came for Maya to walk onto the stage. Rosa led her to the edge and let go of her hand. Maya walked out alone, feeling her way toward the piano. The audience applauded politely. She sat down at the bench and placed her fingers on the keys. The hall fell silent. Thousands of eyes watched her. Millions more watched through screens. Maya took a deep breath. She began to play. Something was wrong. Her fingers, which usually moved with complete confidence, were hesitating. She could feel the doubt creeping into every note. The music that usually flowed so naturally felt forced and mechanical. She made it through the first piece, but she knew it was not her best. The applause was polite, but not enthusiastic. Maya's heart sank. The second piece started badly and got worse. Halfway through, Maya made a mistake. A wrong note that echoed through the silent hall like a gunshot. She stopped playing. The audience held their breath. Maya sat frozen at the piano, her face pale. She could not remember what came next. Her mind had gone completely blank. The silence stretched on for 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15 seconds. An eternity. People in the audience began to whisper. Some were sympathetic. Others were already typing on their phones, sending messages about Maya's humiliating failure. Richard Chong's mother was watching from her home in California, a satisfied smile on her face. Marco Fontini was watching from his apartment in Rome, nodding as if he had known all along that this would happen. Then something unexpected occurred. A voice called out from the audience. It was a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. She shouted loudly and clearly. She shouted that she believed in Maya. She shouted that Maya was the best pianist in the world. Then she shouted for Maya to keep playing. The little girl's mother tried to quiet her, embarrassed by the outburst. But other people in the audience started clapping. First a few, then more, then dozens. They were not clapping to mock Maya. They were clapping to support her. They were telling her it was okay. They were telling her that one mistake did not matter. They were telling her to continue. Maya heard the applause and the little girl's words. Something shifted inside her. She remembered why she had started playing in the first place. It was not for fame or awards, or to prove anyone wrong. It was because she loved music. Because music was the way she saw the world. Because when she played, she was complete in a way that nothing else could make her feel. She took a deep breath. She placed her fingers back on the keys. And she started the second piece again from the beginning. This time, there was no hesitation, no doubt. She played like her life depended on it. She played with every ounce of emotion she had. She played for the little girl who had shouted. She played for her grandmother who had sacrificed everything. She played for Mrs. Chun who had believed in her. She played for every person who had ever been told they were not good enough. The performance that followed was unlike anything the audience had ever witnessed. Maya played all 3 pieces without stopping, transitioning between them in a way that created one continuous emotional journey. She played soft passages that made people lean forward to hear. She played thundering passages that made the chandelier shake. She played with a fire and intensity that left everyone breathless. When the final note faded away, there was complete silence. It lasted only a heartbeat. Then the audience exploded. People leaped to their feet, cheering and crying and stamping their feet. The ovation went on for 10 minutes. Then 15. Then 20. People in the hall later said it was the greatest piano performance they had ever witnessed. People watching online crashed the streaming server because so many were trying to re-watch and share the video. Maya sat at the piano, tears streaming down her face. She could not see the standing ovation, but she could hear it. She could feel the love and support washing over her like a warm wave. She understood now that the critics and doubters did not matter. What mattered was the connection between her music and the hearts of people who listened. That connection was real. That connection was powerful. That connection could never be taken away. The concert changed everything. Maya's moment of vulnerability, followed by her triumphant recovery, made her more beloved than ever. People saw that she was human, that she could struggle and doubt herself just like anyone else. But they also saw that she had the courage to overcome those struggles. She had the strength to face her fears and come out stronger. Richard Chong watched the video of Maya's performance 3 times that night. He could not believe what he had seen. For the first time, he admitted to himself what he had always known deep down. Maya was not just talented. She was a genius. A true artist in a way that he could never be. All his technical perfection, all his training, all his expensive teachers could not match what Maya had inside her. Richard felt something he had never felt before. He felt ashamed. Ashamed of his jealousy. Ashamed of the cruel things he had said. Ashamed of who he had become. 2 years after the New York concert, an extraordinary event took place in Vienna. The same hall where Maya had competed at age 12 was hosting a special celebration. Marco Fontini, the famous pianist who had refused to give Maya first place, was being honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award. He was now 70 years old and still one of the most respected figures in classical music. Despite the controversy over his treatment of Maya. Maya was invited to perform at the ceremony. Many people thought she would refuse. Why would she honor a man who had tried to bring her down? But Maya said yes. She believed in forgiveness. She believed that holding on to anger only hurt yourself. And she had a plan. The night of the ceremony arrived. The great hall is filled with the most important people in the music world. Politicians, celebrities, famous musicians from every country. Marco Fontini sat in the front row, ready to receive his award. He was smiling, enjoying the attention and the praise. But there was tension in the air. Everyone knew the history between Marco and Maya. Everyone was watching to see what would happen. Maya was now 16 years old. She walked onto the stage with the confidence of someone who had performed hundreds of times. She no longer needed anyone to guide her. She knew the feel of the stage, the distance to the piano, the height of the bench. She sat down and addressed the audience. She spoke about Marco Fontini's career and his contributions to music. She was gracious and respectful. She did not mention the past controversy or the pain he had caused her. Marco nodded approvingly, thinking she had finally accepted that he was right about her all along. Then Maya began to play. She had chosen a piece that Marco himself had made famous 40 years ago. It was his signature piece, the one that had launched his career. Everyone in the audience knew it. Marco had recorded it 3 times over the decades. It was considered one of the definitive piano performances of the 20th century. Maya played the piece differently. She took Marco's interpretation and transformed it. She found depths in the music that Marco had never discovered. She brought out emotions that Marco had never expressed. She made the piece completely her own while still honoring its original beauty. It was a masterclass in musical interpretation. It was a demonstration of what a true artist could do. When she finished, the audience was stunned into silence. Then they rose as one, giving her another standing ovation. But this time, something was different. This time, the applause was not just for Maya. It was a statement. It was the music world finally and officially recognizing what everyone had known for years. Maya was not just a talented blind girl with a touching story. She was a musical genius. She was one of the greatest pianists of her generation. And no amount of jealousy or prejudice could change that. Marco Fontini sat in his front row seat, his face pale. He understood what had just happened. Maya had not come to embarrass him or to seek revenge. She had come to show him, and everyone else, the truth. She had come to prove that talent and hard work and heart would always triumph over politics and prejudice. And she had done it by playing his own signature piece better than he ever had. After the performance, Maya did something unexpected. She walked over to where Marco was sitting. She extended her hand toward him. She could not see his face, but she could sense his surprise. She said she forgave him. She said she thanked him, actually. His doubts had pushed her to work harder. His criticism had made her stronger. Without him, she might never have become the pianist she was today. Marco sat frozen for a moment. Then he did something no one had ever seen him do. He took Maya's hand and he apologized. He said he had been wrong about her. He said he had let his own biases blind him to her extraordinary gift. He said she was one of the greatest pianists he had ever heard. Tears were running down his weathered cheeks as he spoke. The moment was captured by dozens of cameras and shared around the world. The headline the next day was not about Marco's Lifetime Achievement Award. It was about Maya's grace and forgiveness. It was about 2 people from different worlds finding common ground through music. In the years that followed, Maya's career continued to flourish. She performed in the greatest concert halls on every continent. She recorded albums that sold millions of copies. She won every major award in classical music, including the ones that Marco Fontini himself had won decades earlier. But she never let the fame change who she was. She remained the same humble, kind, grateful person she had always been. Rosa lived to see all of it. She passed away peacefully when Maya was 25 years old, in their beautiful house with the garden, listening to Maya play the piano one last time. Maya held her grandmother's hand as she took her final breath. She promised that she would never forget everything Rosa had sacrificed for her. She promised that she would continue to make beautiful music for the world. Richard Chong eventually apologized to Maya as well. He had left the competitive music world, realizing that it had made him into someone he did not want to be. He became a music teacher instead, working with children from poor families who could not afford expensive lessons. He sometimes told his students about Maya. He told them that talent could come from anywhere. He told them that the only thing that mattered was the love of music in her heart. Maya never got her sight back. She remained blind for her entire life. But she often said in interviews that her blindness was a gift. It had forced her to hear the world differently. It had allowed her to find colors and sounds that others could never see. It had taught her that limitations were just different kinds of possibilities. When asked what her greatest achievement was, Maya never mentioned her awards or her fame or her record sales. She always said the same thing. Her greatest achievement was that little girl in the New York audience who had shouted when Maya was about to give up. That moment had taught Maya the most important lesson of her life. No matter how dark things seemed, there was always someone out there who believed in you. And sometimes, all you needed was one voice to remind you to keep playing.